I'm sitting here in this empty apartment, staring at 2 plates I set hours ago. The rice has gone cold. The adobo I spent all afternoon making from her recipe sits untouched, the sauce forming that film it gets when nobody's eating. I keep checking my phone. The last message shows she read it at 4:47 p.m. I'm boarding the ferry now, my dear Martin. Finally coming home to you. That was 6 hours ago. Every tricycle that rumbles past makes my heart jump. Every set of footsteps on the stairs outside has me rushing to the window. But it's never her. It's never Rena. The ferry from Bacolod docked at 8 p.m. I watched it from my balcony. People poured out, families reuniting, lovers embracing. I waited for that familiar face, those photos she'd sent me 100 times. Nothing. I called her phone, straight to voicemail. I texted again. Did you make it safely? I'm waiting for you. Still shows delivered, but she hasn't read it. How does someone go from reading every message instantly to complete silence? The apartment feels different now. This morning it felt like the start of something beautiful. I'd scrubbed every corner, bought fresh sheets, even picked up those sampaguita flowers she said reminded her of her grandmother. I wanted everything perfect for her arrival, for our beginning. Now the flowers are already wilting in this humid air, and I'm wondering if she was ever coming at all. I remember exactly how this started. 3 months ago I was scrolling through that Facebook group for British expats in the Philippines. I'd just moved here from Manchester, finally living the dream I'd put off for 30 years while I worked overtime as an electrician. My wife had been gone 10 years, and I'd spent every one of those years just existing, not living. The Philippines seemed like the right place to start over. Cheap, warm, friendly people. A place where a pensioner like me could stretch his money and maybe find some happiness. I posted a photo of my first week in Dumaguete. Nothing special, just me grinning like an idiot at the boulevard, holding a beer. Made it to paradise. I'd written. The comments were the usual welcome messages from other expats. But then her comment appeared. You have such a kind smile. Welcome to the Philippines, Sir Martin. I hope you find everything you're looking for here. Her name was Rena. Profile picture showed a beautiful Filipino woman with the warmest eyes I'd seen in years. Not magazine beautiful, but real beautiful. The kind of face that looked like it smiled often. I clicked on her profile. She was from Bacolod, worked at a call center, taught English part-time, 32 years old. Single. I felt ridiculous for checking, but at 67, you learn not to assume anything. I messaged her back that evening. Just a simple, thank you for the kind welcome. She replied within minutes. We started talking about my first impressions of the Philippines, her love for British movies, how she'd always dreamed of visiting London. The conversation flowed like we'd known each other for years. She sent me voice messages in that musical Filipino accent, and I found myself looking forward to her texts more than anything else in my day. You know, Martin, she told me during one of our late-night calls, I've been saving money to move to Dumaguete. Better opportunities there, and it's so beautiful. Maybe we could meet when I make the move. The way she said it, shy but hopeful, made my heart do things I thought it had forgotten how to do. Those first weeks were magic. We'd video chat every night, her calling me my dear Martin in that sweet way that made me feel 20 years younger. She'd show me around her room through the camera, introduce me to her cousin, who she was staying with. We'd watch movies together online, her laughing at my commentary, me learning Tagalog words just to make her smile. She even sang me Filipino lullabies when I couldn't sleep. For the first time since my wife died, I felt like I had someone who cared whether I made it through another day. I can't wait to cook for you, she'd say. Real Filipino food, not that restaurant stuff. My Lola taught me all her recipes. She sent me photos of her cooking, step-by-step instructions so I could try making her dishes. That's why tonight's adobo sits cold on my table. I wanted to surprise her with her own recipe, made with love in our kitchen. Our kitchen. I'd already started thinking of this place as ours. The delays started small. She was supposed to visit in my second month here, but her niece got sick and she couldn't leave. Then her cousin needed help with some family emergency. Each time, she'd send me photos of the hospital, the worried family members, her tear-stained face. I'm so sorry, my dear Martin. Just a little longer, I promise. How could I be angry at someone for caring about family? That's when the money started. Nothing big at first. 5,000 pesos here and there. Just for the ferry ticket, love. I'll pay you back as soon as I get there. Then it was for documents she needed for her new job in Dumaguete. Then a new suitcase because her old one broke. Always small amounts, always with a reasonable explanation, always followed by photos of whatever she was buying. I didn't mind. After 40 years of marriage, I understood that relationships require investment. Besides, what was I saving my pension for? A lonely grave? The amounts grew slowly. She needed dental work before she could move, too embarrassed about her teeth to meet me. 10,000 pesos, then 15,000 for a root canal. She sent me a video of herself at the dentist, face swollen, looking so vulnerable. I want to be beautiful for you, Martin. You deserve someone who takes care of herself. How do you say no to that? She was improving herself for me, for us. It felt like proof she was serious about our future. But the weeks kept passing. 2 months in Dumaguete became 3. 3 became 4. Every conversation ended with, "Soon, my dear Martin, very soon." She'd send me screenshots of her job applications in Dumaguete, photos of apartments she was considering. "This one has a nice kitchen where I can cook for you," she'd say, making me feel like we were planning a life together. Maybe we were. Maybe I was just too desperate to see the truth. "Why don't I just come visit you in Bacolod?" I asked one evening. The suggestion made her panic. Her cousin was very strict about visitors, she said. Traditional family, very conservative. "It would be disrespectful, Martin. Please understand. I want to come to you as a free woman, not sneaking around like we're doing something wrong." She made it sound noble, honorable. I respected that. Hell, I admired it. The night she was supposed to arrive, I cleaned like a man possessed. Every surface scrubbed, every corner dusted. I bought her favorite shampoo, the expensive kind she'd mentioned once. I arranged those sampaguita flowers just how she'd described her grandmother doing for special occasions. I even asked my neighbor Jun to take our photo when she arrived. "Finally meeting your girlfriend?" he asked with a grin. "I am very happy for you, sir." I was happy too. Happier than I'd been in a decade. She texted me updates all day, photos of her packing, her excitement barely contained in her messages. "Getting ready for my new life with you, my dear Martin. I can hardly believe this day is finally here." At 3 p.m., she sent a selfie at what looked like a ferry terminal. "Just buying my ticket now. I'll be in your arms by dinner time." At 4:47 p.m., the message that's still burning in my memory. "Boarding now. See you soon, my love." I paced my apartment like a caged animal. Checked the ferry schedule a dozen times. Bacolod to Dumaguete, departure 5 p.m., arrival 8 p.m. I had dinner ready by 7:30, thinking I'd surprise her with a home-cooked meal after her journey. By 9 p.m., I was standing on my balcony, watching every tricycle that came up the street. By 10 p.m., I was calling her phone every 15 minutes. By midnight, I was Googling ferry delays, weather reports, anything that might explain her silence. The next morning brought a text that made my blood freeze, not from Rena, but from a Facebook friend who lived in Bacolod. "Martin, I checked that call center Rena said she works at. Mate, there's no such place. The address she gave you is a rice shop." I read the message 10 times, hoping the words would change. They didn't. My hands shook as I typed back. "Are you sure? Maybe she works at a different location?" But even as I wrote it, I knew. That sinking feeling in my chest, the one I'd been pushing down for weeks, suddenly made perfect sense. How had I never video called her at work? How had she always been free to chat during business hours? How had I never asked for her company's name so I could surprise her with flowers? I opened her Facebook profile with trembling fingers, really looked at it this time, not through the haze of loneliness and hope. No tagged photos with friends, no family members commenting on her posts. No check-ins at restaurants or events. Just carefully curated selfies and inspirational quotes. Her friends list was hidden, her work history vague. Even her education details were generic. Studied business at local university. Which university? Which city? How had I never asked? That evening, I did something that still makes me ashamed. I created a fake Facebook account and messaged her. "Rena, this is Martin. Please, just tell me you're safe. If you need more help, I'll send it. I just need to know you're okay." The message showed delivered immediately. Then, an hour later, read. The blue check marks that had become my lifeline over these months now felt like a death sentence. She never replied. The next day, her account was gone. Deleted, deactivated, vanished like she'd never existed at all. I searched every variation of her name, every detail she'd ever shared. Nothing. It was like our entire relationship had been erased from the internet in a single click. I couldn't eat for 3 days. Couldn't sleep. I'd wake up reaching for my phone, forgetting for those first few seconds that there would be no good morning message waiting. No, how did you sleep, my dear Martin? No plans for her imaginary arrival. The apartment felt haunted by a ghost who'd never even lived there. My neighbor June found me sitting on my balcony at 3 a.m., still in the clothes I'd worn to meet her ferry. Sir Martin, you look terrible. Are you sick? How do you explain that the woman you loved never existed? That you'd spent 4 months falling in love with a fantasy? She's not coming, I finally managed. She was never coming. Jun didn't ask questions. He just brought me coffee and sat with me until sunrise. The weeks that followed were the darkest I'd experienced since my wife's death. But this was different. When Sarah died, I grieved for something real, something beautiful we'd actually shared. This grief felt poisoned, tainted with humiliation and self-doubt. How desperate had I seemed? How obvious was my loneliness? Had she laughed about the old British man sending money to his imaginary girlfriend? I deleted our conversations without reading them, threw away the flowers, the special shampoo, the extra pillows I'd bought for her side of the bed. But I couldn't bring myself to remove the second plate from my table setting. Some pathetic part of me still hoped she might knock on my door with some incredible explanation. Family emergency, lost phone, hospital stay, anything that would make this nightmare make sense. Slowly, very slowly, I started putting myself back together. I began leaving the apartment again, walking the Dumaguete Boulevard where tourists and expats gathered. I made real friends, people I could see and touch and verify existed. I learned to cook Filipino food not from Rena's instructions but from June's wife, who taught me with patience and kindness that asked for nothing in return. One evening, maybe 6 weeks after that final message, I found myself at the ferry terminal, not waiting for anyone, just watching the boats come and go. Families reuniting, lovers embracing, all the meetings that should have been mine. An old fisherman sitting nearby struck up a conversation. "Waiting for someone, sir?" he asked in broken English. "No," I replied, and for the first time, it felt true. Not waiting anymore. The old man nodded like he understood something I was just beginning to learn. "Sometimes the waiting is the trap," he said. "Sometimes we must stop waiting to start living." I still think about her. Not every day like before, but often enough to remind me of the lessons she taught me without meaning to. I learned that loneliness can make you blind to red flags bigger than billboards. I learned that real love requires presence, not just promises. I learned that the most convincing lies are the ones we desperately want to believe. Did she ever care about me at all? I'll never know. Maybe there was some small part of her that felt something real during our late-night conversations. Maybe she told herself she'd actually visit someday. Maybe she was just a young woman trying to survive in whatever way she could, and I happened to be a convenient source of hope and money. Maybe she was never even the woman in those photos. What I do know is this. I came to the Philippines looking for love, and I found something more valuable. I found myself again, not the desperate, lonely widower sending money to strangers on the internet, but the man who could build a life worth living without waiting for someone else to validate it. I still set 2 plates sometimes, out of habit more than hope. But now the second plate is for friends who actually show up. Jun and his wife, Paul, the British expat who warned me about online romances and whom I should have listened to. Maria, the elderly Filipina who lives downstairs and shares stories of her late husband that remind me grief and joy can coexist. The apartment is different now. Smaller somehow, but warmer. The bed isn't too big anymore. It's exactly the right size for one man learning to sleep peacefully again. The kitchen isn't waiting for someone else's recipes. It's making its own memories with food shared among real friends. Sometimes I still walk past the ferry terminal. Not to wait, but to remember. To honor that version of myself who believed love could arrive on a 5 p.m. boat from Bacolod. He was naive, maybe foolish, but he wasn't wrong to hope. He just needed to learn that the love worth waiting for doesn't ask you to wait alone in the dark. I kept one photo from our conversations. Not of her, but a screenshot of something she wrote that I now understand differently. Love means being brave enough to trust again, Martin, even when you've been hurt before. I thought she was talking about my grief for Sarah. Now I realize she might have been talking about herself, about trusting someone enough to be honest with them. She never found that courage. Maybe she never had the chance to learn it. Do I forgive her? That's the question I wrestle with during my evening walks along the boulevard. Forgiveness seems too simple for something this complicated. She wasn't a monster, just a person making choices I can't fully understand from circumstances I never really knew. But forgiveness isn't about understanding someone else's choices. It's about making peace with your own. I forgive myself for being lonely. I forgive myself for believing in love at first digital sight. I forgive myself for missing red flags that seem obvious now but were invisible through the fog of hope and desperation. I forgive myself for being human in a world that often punishes humanity with betrayal. The evening I'm writing this, I made adobo again. Her recipe, but cooked my way now, adjusted to my taste instead of some imagined preference. I ate it slowly, savoring flavors that belonged to me instead of some ghost. When I was finished, I washed both plates and put them away. Tomorrow I'll set the table for whoever actually shows up. I booked us an apartment. I set the table for 2. She said she was boarding the ferry at 5 p.m. I waited all night, watching every tricycle that passed. She never came, and now I know she never planned to. But that's not the end of the story. That's just where my real story began. I don't wait for ferries anymore. I catch them when I want to go somewhere new. I don't wait for love to find me. I create love in my daily life with people who exist in more than pixels and promises. I don't wait for someone else to make me feel at home. I build home with my own hands and heart. The plates are clean. The flowers are fresh, bought for my own joy rather than someone else's arrival. The apartment is quiet, but it's a peaceful quiet now, not an empty one. I'm not waiting for anyone anymore, not even the man I used to be. He served his purpose. He brought me here, to this place, to this understanding, to this peace. If she ever existed, if she ever thinks about the British man who believed in her promises, I hope she finds whatever she was really looking for. As for me, I found something I wasn't even looking for, the ability to love my own company again, to trust my own judgment, to believe in my own worth without external validation. I waited for her once. Now I wait for no one, not even myself. I just live, one day at a time, one real moment at a time, in this beautiful country that gave me everything except what I thought I wanted. And that turned out to be exactly what I needed.